GLM 5.2 pumps out 212 tokens per second, and Grok 4.5 tops out at 80 to 90 tokens per second, so that's more than double the throughput. On API pricing, GLM 5.2 comes in 41% cheaper on input tokens, with numbers pulled from artificial analysis and verified against official pricing pages. Both models dropped recently, and the AI space moves fast, so picking the wrong one right now has real cost consequences. I'm running a GLM 5.2 versus Grok 4.5 across 4 real tests: speed, accuracy, pricing, and context window. And every number here is search verified. No vendor money, no cherry picking. The numbers look pretty one-sided going in, but Grok 4.5 has one specific advantage that might actually matter more to you than all the benchmarks combined, and I want to make sure you hear it before you decide. So who is this comparison actually for? If you're a developer running API calls at scale, the cost gap here adds up fast when you're sending millions of tokens, and 41% says cheaper on input tokens is not a rounding error. If you just want a flat monthly plan with no math, that's a totally different question, and I want to make sure you walk away knowing which one fits your actual situation, not just which one wins on paper. Test 1 is reasoning, speed, and latency. Slow output throughput is a real bottleneck when you're running an agent loop or waiting on a long code generation task. And every second the model spends generating, you're either paying for compute time or watching a cursor blink, and that compounds fast when you're chaining calls together. What I found here is pretty interesting. GLM 5.2 clocks in at 212 tokens per second according to artificial analysis, and Grok 4.5 sits at 80 to 90 tokens per second across 2 separate community sources, which is a massive gap. The caveat I have to give you is that first token latency data only exists for Grok 4.5, about 13.8 seconds to first token, and GLM 5.2 has no published number there, so that part of the comparison is genuinely incomplete. GLM 5.2 takes this one. I was expecting the gap to be noticeable, but more than double the throughput is a bigger margin than I thought I'd see, and on raw output speed it's not close. That puts GLM 5.2 up 1 to 0, and the latency picture stays murky because GLM just doesn't publish that number. Test 2 is factual accuracy, and this one hurts when it goes wrong in a real way. You ship a summary to a client and one of the facts is just wrong, or your agent confidently hallucinates an API endpoint that doesn't exist and you spend an hour debugging something that was never real, which is the kind of failure mode that makes you lose trust in a model fast. This is where things get messy. GLM 5.2 scores 89.5% on GPQA Diamond, which is a tough science reasoning benchmark and a strong number, but Grok 4.5 doesn't have a published GPQA score at all. On the flip side, Grok 4.5 has a reported 54% hallucination rate from Tech Times, and GLM 5.2 has no published hallucination figure, so these metrics aren't measuring the same thing, and you honestly can't make a clean call here. This one's a tie, and I was genuinely expecting to call a winner. I thought one of them would have a clear accuracy edge, but the data just doesn't line up on a common benchmark, so I can't in good conscience hand this to either side. The score stays GLM 5.21, Grok 4.50, with one test tied, and no winner on accuracy until someone runs them both through the same eval. Test 3 is API pricing and cost efficiency, and the failure mode here is pretty concrete. You build a product, you scale it up, and your token bill is way higher than you budgeted because you pick the more expensive model without checking. And at millions of tokens a month, even a 30% price difference is the kind of number that changes whether your unit economics actually work. What surprised me when I pulled up the actual pricing pages is how consistent the gap is across every tier. GLM 5.2 comes in at 140 per million input tokens. Grok 4.5 is 2.00, so that's 41% cheaper. Output tokens are 4.40 versus 6.00, about 36% cheaper, and cached input is 0.26 versus 0.50, nearly half the cost. Consumer plans are harder to compare directly because GLM has tiered coding plans from $3 to $160 a month, and Grok has a flat $30 Super Grok, so those are kind of apples to oranges. GLM 5.2 takes the pricing test. I went in expecting a gap, but seeing it hold across input, output, and cache tokens all at once was pretty striking. And every single API tier is cheaper on GLM 5.2. That moves the score to GLM 5.2, 2, Grok 4.50, 1 tied, And if you're running API calls at any real volume, this gap compounds into real money pretty quickly. Test 4 is context window and long document handling. And the failure mode is that you feed a model a 300-page legal document or a giant codebase and it silently truncates the input. You don't always know what happened. And the model starts reasoning on incomplete information and you get answers that feel right but are missing context from the parts it dropped. The published specs here are pretty straightforward. GLM 5.2 has a 1 million token context window and Grok 4.5 is 500,000 tokens, so exactly double. And GLM 5.2 also publishes a 128,000 token max output per response, which is a number Grok 4.5 doesn't disclose at all. Having a big context window and actually using it well are two different things, but on the published specs, this one isn't close. GLM 5.2 wins test 4. Honestly, I was expecting both models to be in the same ballpark on context, but a full 2x difference is not a small gap, and 1 million tokens versus 500,000 is a real constraint if you're working with massive documents. That closes out the scorecard at GLM 5.23, Grok 4.50, 1 tied, 3 wins on 3 comparable tests. So here's where GLM 5.2 clearly beats Grok 4.5. On speed, it's 212 tokens per second versus 80 to 90 tokens per second, so more than 2.5x faster output. On pricing, it's 41% cheaper on input tokens, 36% cheaper on output, and cached input is nearly half the cost. On context, it's a 1 million token window versus 500,000, plus a published 128,000 token max output guarantee that Grok 4.5 just doesn't have. Now here's where Grok 4.5 actually has a real edge. The Super Grok plan is a flat $30 a month with no tiered confusion, no token math, just one price. And if you're a consumer user who doesn't want to think about usage costs, that's genuinely simpler. Grok 4.5 also publishes its first token latency at 13.8 seconds, which is a transparency point GLM 5.2 currently doesn't match. Alright, so honestly I went in thinking this might be closer, and it wasn't. GLM 5.2 swept the comparable tests, but the decision rule is still real. If you're a developer running API calls at scale and you care about throughput, cost per token, and long document support, GLM 5.2 is the pick. 41% cheaper, 2.5x faster output, double the context. If you're a regular user who wants one flat subscription and no token math, Grok 4.5's $30 Super Grok plan is genuinely the simpler choice.